Hello and welcome back to episode 78 of the award-winning combat sports podcast, The Boxing Show, with me, your host, Rob Tebbutt. As always, let's remind everybody to please like, comment and subscribe. Turn your notifications on for more boxing content. Now that's out of the way, I am delighted to be joined by our usual co-host, Mr. Andy Clarke of Sky Sports Boxing, and the hardest man in Bournemouth, no diddy, the former WBO cruiserweight champion of the world, Chris Billam-Smith. How are we doing, guys?
Good, yeah, very well.
Chris, thanks very much for joining us, keeping the WBO quota fully intact. Obviously no Barry today. I think his words were, I can't be asked to talk about that shit at the weekend. He didn't really say that, in case anyone from the ring is watching, want to give him a job. But thanks for joining us today, Chris. How you doing?
Yeah, good, mate. Thanks for having me. I'm all good, mate. I feel like it's a lot longer than it has been since I've boxed. Like, what is it, 10 days? And
yeah, not used to you looking as
I know.
Clean as this.
Everyone I've seen has gone, well, you look much better. But I think the last fight was Ramirez, so I looked pretty battered, and from that one, obviously, with the nearly 30 stitches or whatever it was. So yeah, looked a lot better this time. Although some commentators would have, if you'd listened to their commentary, not yours, Andy, yours are good. They would have thought I'd look like I wouldn't be able to. I'd be in a wheelchair and not be able to, be seen in public. But
any in particular commentators that you're talking about here, Chris?
Nah, just there was a few actually.
We'll push that to one side. But before we move on and talk about what was really a terrible weekend of boxing, let's put it out there and be honest. The next couple of hours hopefully will be slightly more entertaining. Let's go back and talk about your win over Brandon Glanton. First and foremost, congratulations. Not the easiest fight to go into on the back of, you mentioned that Zurdo Ramirez fight back out in Saudi Arabia, but two of us at least felt it was a pretty comfortable win.
Yeah, no, I felt comfortable in there. Obviously, he was always going to be dangerous early on, but I felt like I worked the body really well early on, and that did a lot of the work I needed it to do. I think the punch stats showed that as well, like body shots landed and stuff. And then just felt in control towards the end, and felt comfortable in there. Never really. I think he hit. I felt one shot was noticeable early on, third or fourth round, and then felt comfortable enough in there. And I think it was at the end of round 5. Shane was like, enjoy it, have fun with it, and I kind of did that. So it was a bit more movement, a bit more sort of move in, attack, get back out of range, and don't let him get any of his powerful shots off.
One of the things that we spoke about before the fight on the preview show was kind of where you were at really at this stage of your career, coming off the back of the Ramirez fight, and you've been, it was sort of no secret, you've been well matched and tough matched throughout your career. Was kind of whether or not you still had it really. You've achieved an awful lot in the sport. You've headlined at the home of Bournemouth, etc. How did you feel when you were in there? Obviously, you're not 26, 27 anymore, but you seem to have more than enough left.
Yeah, I had felt like I said, I felt comfortable in there. It wasn't a great camp at all, to be honest, in terms of how I felt during camp. But they're never perfect. But yeah, it was probably. I mean, I actually said that to Shane after it was terrible camp. He's like, mate, I don't think you've ever had a good camp. And I was like, nah, I have. I've had some good ones. The Lawrence camp was really good until I got ill on fight week. But no, I think I felt like the work I'd done in camp and finished strongly was good. But so yeah.
Okay, right. We'll come on to talk about what's next for you once we talk about the cruiserweight title fight.
Got one question for you actually, if we got time.
Got time, Andy? All good.
So do you, when people talk about you, they'll quite often talk about miles on the clock and all the hard fights you've had. Do you feel like that's fair, or that's maybe been a bit overblown? Because if I look at what's actually happened in your fights over the last few years, Isaac Chamberlain, hard fight, was a pretty hard fight, really good fight. Who came after that? Jojai, early stoppage. Yeah, you got clipped a few times, but you knocked him out in the 5th round. Bakole, that was a hard fight. I don't think anybody could argue that it wasn't. Masternak, again, you caught a few, but it got stopped at halfway. Riakpour, really good performance. He didn't really land on you with anything, to be honest, that I remember of any real substance. And then Zurdo Ramirez, obviously, yes, really hard fight. Yeah. But I just wonder whether you feel like it's something that people say without having really thought about it.
I think they just look at my style when I throw a lot, and I think the shots that do catch me sometimes, I'll be like pulling away or turning, so it would look worse, and you get the spray of water with that as well and stuff like that. Obviously, I come out of a lot of them cut, but most of the time they're head clashes. Probably 90% of the cuts I've had all over this eye, they're all head clashes from sort of going in close and being in close. I think my style is probably another reason why, but there's been I haven't been knocked down or anything like that. Nothing, no real visibly hurt at times where I'm all over the place and someone stuck it on me. So yeah, I think there's definitely a misunderstanding there in a way, I guess. I don't feel like it's taking a toll on me or anything like that. I just, the thing for me now, the hardest thing is just being away from family. Is you're a father of a young one, or you both are, and you spend a lot of time away, and that's the thing that eats away at me. Otherwise I'd feel as fresh as I have my whole career, to be honest.
There we go. Okay, we will come on to, as I mentioned, to what's next for you once we talk about Badou Jack and his fight this past weekend. But Andy, going to come to you first. Going to do our best to try and get through these shows, particularly Friday and Saturday. Wasn't, I think we've all been quite, I don't want to say fortunate, but we've been blessed with some good cards over the last 18 months or so, particularly with the influx of sort of Riyadh season events. Friday and Saturday wasn't really one of them, though, was it, Andy?
No, they didn't deliver, did they? And you're always at the mercy of that as a promoter, as an organizer, and that sport, isn't it? We don't know what's going to happen, and that's the appeal of it, really, because when it's good, it's amazing, but then it's not always amazing, or it would lose its shine. So if the fights don't deliver, there's not really anything you can do about that. So the inevitable criticism that comes with it, you have to just try and shrug it off, I think, because what else can you do? You look at the New York card, and what was supposed to happen there really was that the left-hand side all won and looked as good as possible doing it. And obviously that wasn't what happened. And then in Riyadh, there were some decent matchups on that card. There were some good fights on that card, but again, they just didn't really catch fire. They didn't really deliver. And what can you do to an extent? I felt a bit for Canelo, because somebody who's got the opportunity to fight for Undisputed that William Scull had, I think you can expect more of them than just trying to get through the rounds. But no, that's an easy thing to say, because he'd not been up at that kind of level, and maybe he just didn't really expect to win that fight. Maybe he didn't really feel like he could win that fight, and why would he just walk into a hail of gunfire for us, which is kind of what he would have been doing if he'd gone down that route. And you can get on Canelo and say, well, he should have done more, he should have done this, but he's eyeing up a fight with Terence Crawford, and the only possible way it could go wrong against Scull, he would have figured out after 2 or 3 rounds, is if he just got incredibly careless, or if he caused himself some kind of injury or something really weird happened. And it was very, very simple to avoid that by just having I was going to say a 12-round spar, but it wasn't, was it? Because if you brought a sparring partner in and they did that, you would stop it after 2 or 3 rounds and say, listen, we're not paying you for this. So it just didn't, like I say, it just didn't deliver, and sometimes it doesn't, and there's not all that much you can do about it, to be honest. As an organizer, as a promoter, you can look at the individual fighters and ask questions of them. That you can do.
I think the thing with Scull is that he is seen the only way to beat Canelo is by moving, or obviously Bivol was moving in and out more and still throwing lots of shots, but if you look at the Lara fight and stuff like that, people have given him trouble on movers in the past, and as he's aging, he's not cutting the ring off as well and stuff like that. So I think in a way he probably thought that was the only way he was going to win, because he doesn't have the punch power. Well, don't know if anyone has the punch power to stop Canelo. Do you know what I mean? So it's definitely a tough one with a fight of that magnitude and with the type of person you've got in the opponent corner.
Yeah, I mean, and I kind of had the feeling that he might move, but I felt that as the bout wore on, he might try and win the fight. I mean, in his head, he said after the fight that he felt that he'd won. William Scull. I mean, I'm not sure there really was any winners in that fight. I mean, but once you have, I think Shakur Stevenson put a really good tweet out, which made a lot of sense. He said if Canelo was boxing like Scull, they'd be giving the rounds to Canelo. It was that type of fight where I'm not for it should be fighter A and fighter B, but in the real world, it's not. And if you're Canelo and you're coming forwards and you've got a $300-400 million fight signed with Terence Crawford in a few months, you're going to win. And that's unfortunately the way things go. Whether we like it or not, that is unfortunately how it goes.
I think Teddy Atlas said something similar as well, something along those lines of like Scull won some round. He said he wouldn't have argued if Scull got it by a round or something like that. But he's not saying that Scull won the fight.
Yeah, and I think you can see that with the scorecards. You've got 115, 113 for Canelo, which is a fair enough card, and then you've got 119, 109 for Canelo, which is also kind of fair enough. Like you can kind of have any range of scoring. It was I'm
not like I don't feel let down by Scull, despite what I just said there. I don't, because he won that IBF title. You look at his record; it was hard to know how good he was. He's in this huge fight. It's a massive payday. He's kind of won the lottery in a way. And he did what he did, and he can now continue with his career and see what's next for him after this, because it was a kind of strange fight for Undisputed, wasn't it? Like, we've been complaining for a long time about not getting enough of them, although there's been loads actually when you think about it in the last few years compared to the previous 10 or 15 years. But that one on paper as well was probably the most. That or Terence Crawford, Julius Ndongo would probably be the two where you look to them beforehand and just think there's only one winner here.
Yeah, I mean, this was dressed up as, Canelo's shot at becoming undisputed twice. It's a bit different, and same with Alexander Usyk against Daniel Dubois. If you vacated the title and then you go and win it back against, Usyk's fine, somebody's already stopped. But Canelo, much was made about him becoming undisputed again. The carrot to dangle wasn't becoming undisputed. It was to make that Terence Crawford fight. If he wins that, yes, he gets a belt back that he gave away for two, with respect to them, maybe fringe level guys in Vladimir Shishkin and William Scull to fight for. He now gets it back. It was probably one of the more hollow undisputed, probably the most hollow undisputed fight. At least Crawford and Ndongo was two at the time unified
two
champions.
Belts each.
Yeah, exactly.
I know Ndongo. Yeah, I mean, he'd gone to Russia and
Edward Troyanovsky, knocked him out in a round, and then beat Ricky Burns. But anyway, right, let's go to Friday. We've still got some bits on Canelo and obviously the rest of the card on Saturday to discuss. Chris, going to come to you first. Ryan Garcia made his return from his PED ban. Always worth pointing that out. To really underwhelm in quite a spectacular way against Rolando Romero. Dropped in the second round and really went out with a bit of a whimper.
Yeah, I think it was a strange one. A lot of posing and posturing from both. Like, looked like I know they've sparred before. Don't know how many rounds they've done, but it looked like two lads who had sparred a lot, or at least sparred and hurt each other. Like, they were quite both reacting from feints a lot, and no one really took control of the fight at any real point in terms of like trying to stamp their authority. Obviously, the second round, right off the bat, Rolly dropped Garcia, and probably felt a bit comfortable from them. Thought I can hurt you at any point, but yeah, it was a strange watch, and you wonder if it's like the environment you're in. You're in the middle of New York, Times Square. That's a strange environment. There's an atmosphere, but not maybe what you're used to with a boxing atmosphere. And you wonder if that affects them. But
it's like a COVID show, wasn't it?
Yeah, they were. Yeah,
with loads of people.
There was
like as in like actual.
Matchroom did a COVID show. in downtown Arizona.
Yeah,
was it Arizona? They did one. Shakram Giasov boxed on it. I can't remember who else, but yeah, they did a show out there, and it was similar to that. Just before we kind of continue, obviously you boxed Ramirez in Saudi Arabia. Quite a different atmosphere to boxing at Selhurst Park or obviously in Bournemouth. What was it like for you? Did it add? Did it detract? Or did you not really?
I was fortunate enough to have the experience of the COVID shows. You know, I boxed in Matchroom Garden once without any fans and once with limited Wembley Arena with nobody there, and so I had that experience. So it's hard to judge, and also I started the fight really well. I think atmosphere would always add to it. Even at Tottenham, obviously I was on very early and there wasn't loads of people there, so I guess I never felt the need to, or the atmosphere never took hold of me to push on, and you land one good shot and you hear the crowd roar and you think you build on that and you get that momentum. But yeah, so I guess in a way it affects you, but you also were professional athletes, and it's the same for both people. So you can't use it as an excuse. You've got to be ready for it.
Andy, in the build-up to Ryan Garcia against Rolando Romero, much was made about the change in demeanour of Ryan Garcia when compared to his, I don't even know how to describe his build-up with Devin Haney last year ahead of their fight in April. But much was made about, this is a different Ryan Garcia. He was acting completely different. Obviously, on the night, he performed completely different. How many question marks does that now raise, further question marks, over Ryan Garcia's performance against Devin Haney? I mean, we've spoken about it on the show multiple times, the fact that he didn't make the weight, the fact that he was found with PEDs in his system. Did we just see a clean Ryan Garcia this weekend who had to make weight, who didn't have the unfair advantages that he had against Devin Haney?
I mean, that's one very possible conclusion that you can draw. I saw a tweet from Paulie Malignaggi in the aftermath of the fight, which made that exact point in quite strident terms. And there's no getting away from the fact that against Haney, he blew the weight. He missed it by quite a long way. My personal opinion is that he would have known that was going to happen. I don't know that, but I think that. And he had PEDs in his system. And those are facts. They happened in real life. That's what happened. And then you saw that performance, and then you saw this one. And those are two differences. Again, we're just talking facts here. It doesn't mean that there can't be other things going on. There are so many question marks around Ryan Garcia for me, because all the carry-on before that fight with Haney, after the event, he tried to claim it as smoke and mirrors and all part of the game plan. I didn't buy that. I mean, he's the most convincing actor of all time. If that was the case, he should pack it in now and just become a film star, because he's got the looks. If he's got the acting ability to go with it, that would have taken, then he's on to an absolute winner. And it was very different this time around. Just mentally, I wonder, where is he at with the sport and just with himself? Because he's young and he's really famous, and he's come up in the age of social media, and I just think finding your own identity and knowing who you are for those kinds of people can be very, very difficult. And I do sympathise with that. I've got no frame of reference for it myself, none whatsoever. But that's not an easy thing. Does he really want to box anymore? Does he feel kind of trapped into it because it's all that he knows? Does he need to box anymore, money-wise? I'd assume probably not. But what else is he going to do? He's got lots of things he needs to address and needs to try and find some answers to, and it's probably going to be quite hard for him, to be honest. I mean, he's made a lot of money, and that will always mean that sympathy often will be in short supply, and he did what he did against Haney in that first fight. But at the same time, I don't think it's easy being him at the minute. I really don't. That performance was weird, and he said so afterwards. He said, I don't really know why I boxed like that. I don't really know what happened, but it wasn't me. It wasn't good enough. And he's absolutely right. It wasn't.
You could hear Derek James in the corner after 7 or 8 rounds. Look, we need to go here. We need to be a dog. You need to do this. You need to do that. And it just wasn't in there. It was quite the contrast, Chris, from when he picked himself up off the floor against Luke Campbell all of those years ago. Of course, former gym mate of yours.
Yeah. I mean, I was there that night, and we leaped out of our seats in that second round and thought, this is it. Luke's gonna beat him, and he literally bounced off the canvas that night, and then performed really well and just looked in control. Very obviously, Rolly and Luke are very different styles, but yeah, just very, very different. And even the next day, like we spoke to him the next day morning at breakfast, and he was really like open and humble with us in terms of like chatting to Shane and me, and had a really good conversation with him and in his family all around him, etc. But like Andy said, that fame at a young age isn't good for anyone. I don't care who you are. It's got to be nearly impossible to deal with, especially in this day and age of how it is with social media and everyone looking for likes, and I think that's really difficult, and it's its own little sort of epidemic in terms of these people getting famous off of YouTube and stuff like that. And he's famous from boxing, but all the other stuff that comes with it as well. So I think that's really hard to take. I'm fortunate, whereas not that I'm famous, but like my career and the sort of where I've turned pro at 27. So I didn't win a world title till I was 32. So that was, I'm a lot wiser, where he's been in the limelight from a very young age and 100 times more than I have. And I think that's really dangerous for young people. And like Andy said, I think, like, does he love boxing like he once did because he's kind of achieved that? He's got the Haney fight, although it's obviously he's failed drugs tests and had peds in his system. That win and that feeling of getting the win will still be a big thing for him, and like a box ticked after their background and their amateur days. So what's his goal? What is his goal? Is it money? Is it fame through boxing in terms of, or is it, does he actually want to win a world title and be the best? And I think that's what it comes down to. And I don't think it certainly didn't look like he did the other night.
Andy, where next for Ryan Garcia? I mean, everything was made up beforehand. We will come onto it and talk about the Saudi curse. Like these fights that we had it with Joshua and Wilder. We had it with, remember, the original date for Fury and Usyk until Ngannou came rocking up, and there's probably other examples as well. But it looks as though that Haney fight is still there, contractually agreed to. Haney and his camp have already spoke about their intent to do it. I'm not surprised after seeing how Ryan Garcia boxed. Is it that simple? He's signed the fight. It's a big fight. He's just going to go into that fight. What do you think happens next with Ryan Garcia?
I think it probably is that. I don't see what else you would do, because if you wanted to take another one to try and get a win and get some semblance of kind of order back, if you like, he's still going to have to fight someone pretty decent. And what if he loses again? Which is possible. It's possible on off the back of that performance. So I feel like it will be that. With him, it reminds me of, I think it was Bob Arum talking about Chavez Jr. It was someone in the sport talking about Chavez Jr. And they said that his life is like a reality show and people want to know what happens next. And that's where Garcia is. But we're a few years down the line from when that comment was made, and the world is even more intense than it was then. And he is that. He is like a reality show. But the problem is the people watching it don't care about him. They don't care. They're not pulling for the next instalment to be a wild success. They're not bothered. They just want it to be interesting. It could be tragic. It could be brilliant. It could be both. So long as it gets the views and interests people, that's kind of what his career has become. And I don't really know, if you're him, how you navigate your way out of that, apart from just going completely silent, going off all those channels, and withdrawing from public view. Maybe that's what he needs to do.
Just so difficult to see somebody who's kind of, obviously he's been boxing since he was a child, but a lot of his success has come from being in that space and being in that world, and even arguably even more so since the Devin Haney fight. He was the biggest thing on social media for certainly a couple of weeks in and around that fight. So yeah, going to be a very interesting one to see what happens next. If it is indeed Devin Haney, then I think it's fair to say, Andy, that his performance against Jose Ramirez hardly whet the appetite for Haney Garcia 2 or Garcia Haney 2. I'm not sure how they'll build that one. A pretty, I don't know how to describe the Haney performance against Ramirez. Negative. A lot of people mentioning the Garcia beating that he took in April, and whether or not there were some effects on display at the weekend from that. What did you make of his performance? Another fight that troubled the CompuBox numbers on the wrong end of the scale. Another kind of record setting or low for punches. What did you make of Haney's performance?
I find Haney really interesting in the same way that I find Garcia interesting, and the same with Shakur Stevenson and Gervonta Davis, because I remember you were the one who said it on here a while ago that particularly with Davis, who was obviously a Mayweather protege, but also with Stevenson and Haney particularly, Garcia's kind of different but also sort of the same. They all would have looked at Money Mayweather when they were coming through as the man, and he was an amazing blueprint for not just how you win fights, but how you model your brand and make sure you get paid what you're worth and steer your career and drive your career and be captain of your own ship. There just is no better example of it than him. But as you said when we were chatting before we started, he was Pretty Boy Floyd first, where he was really good to watch and took hard fights. And then he transitioned into Money Mayweather, and it became about the lifestyle and the purses. Not that he ever really lived that lifestyle, because everybody will tell you he was the hardest trainer they've ever seen in their life. And it became about the O, when all of a sudden this guy who, to a casual audience, can't have been that good to watch towards the end, was a massive box office star because people wanted to see if he was going to keep winning. But it's almost like some of them are trying to go straight to being Money Mayweather without doing the Pretty Boy Floyd bit first. Because Haney's a really good fighter. And I was very sympathetic to what happened against Garcia, because he's in with someone who blew the weight and then had PEDs in his system. And then when he complained about it, he was dismissed as some kind of crybaby. Yeah. I mean, it was madness. I mean, I get that boxing and boxers are generally pretty anti-establishment, and what you don't do is go complaining to the teacher. It's just not what they do. But at the same time, he was completely justified.
What's he supposed to do?
Yeah. And he's been an undisputed champion, and he's achieved so much, but he's not box office as we know it. You know, he isn't, is he? No. You know, he's very good, but he's not box office. So how you can go out there and do that on the weekend against a fighter in Jose Ramirez, who, when I saw him on your card, the one you boxed on against Arnold Barboza, and I've always really liked Ramirez because he's all action and good to watch. He's done, isn't he?
Yeah, he looked like a shot fighter.
Yeah, he's done. So how you can go out there and do that? I just don't know.
And that fight was at 147 the other night, yeah?
I think they're both 143 or something.
Yeah, I think it was a catch weight
like
of 144.
Okay, I was going to say, because Ramirez obviously coming up in weight, so.
But I think he's been. I remember seeing him the day before the weigh-in in Saudi on your card when he boxed Barboza. I remember thinking at the time, you've been holding that weight for a long time. He's been a big 140 for a long time. And one of my theories, as somebody who never makes weight, is that once you keep making it too long, you can go off the cliff, and then by the time you actually move up, it doesn't matter. You've lost all of your natural kind of zip in your work anyway, because you just fried yourself for too long.
Just depleted yourself for too long.
And right. No matter when you move up, it doesn't look. Jarrett Hurd, great example of that. At 54, he was great when he was cutting the weight. When he moved up to 60, he had nothing left in him. But anyway, kind of aside from that, I felt that Ramirez in the Barboza fight just couldn't get off, and Barboza won that fight really in second gear. Haney won it in almost reverse, Chris.
Yeah, it's just weird. Just so much. We know he can box and stuff, but that just wasn't. There was just so much movement. Especially as we've seen him perform to such a high level, like the Loma fight. I know we spoke about it before. Like, I actually thought Loma won that fight, but that was the fight that made me realise that Devin Haney is actually an unbelievable fighter because of the work he did in that fight. But that was so far off it the other night, and against someone who he could easily look good against. Like, Ramirez isn't someone to make people look bad, or and he's not awkward or anything like that. So you think you just go about your business and get the job done in good fashion. But yeah, it wasn't to be.
Yeah, I kind of felt before the fight it would be a bit of a stinker because that's Devin Haney boxes very safety first. I did think there would be some hangover from the Garcia fight. Didn't quite necessarily expect it to be that much, but I wasn't expecting Haney to try and push him back or anything like that. I felt like he would probably try and stick and move and keep it on the outside. Didn't quite envision what we saw on Friday night. But with that being said, it does look as though Garcia Haney 2, Haney Garcia 2 is going to happen.
It goes to show, though, doesn't it? Like, we haven't spoke about Rolly and what's next for him.
Yeah,
and
good
he
point.
just beat Ryan Garcia,
Yeah,
one of the
good
biggest
point.
names.
We were going to come on to that, but next with on this part of it, Haney versus Garcia 2. How does that go? Like, really?
Based
on
the other night.
Do you want to see it?
I'm based off the other night. It doesn't interest me. And then even the stuff like all the marrings of the first fight where he's failed a drugs test, he's missed weight. That just it makes you just leaves a bad taste in your mouth, doesn't it? So it doesn't feel anywhere near as big as it could have done if it was this weekend. Where if it was Haney Garcia this weekend, then we would have been absolutely buzzing about it. But in a way, because the first fight was a good fight, and it was, even though it was obviously marred by the drugs, etc., but it would have been much bigger. But now it's like, well, I feel like both of them now need a comeback fight to sort of establish themselves and look good before going into that fight. But that's obviously unlikely to happen.
If it was to happen next, who would you put your money on?
Garcia, probably. Even though, I don't know. It's a tough one. I don't know. Maybe I feel like Garcia needs motivating. And then after the other night, his honesty, maybe he realises that himself. And he's, like I said, when we met him after the fight with Luke, like, he seemed humble enough and aware enough then of like what's good for him. And then I think that was a wake up call the other day, and maybe that would wake him up and get him into shape.
There was some talk about him reuniting with Eddie Reynoso, who was, of course, in Riyadh for Canelo the following night. So maybe that's something that happens in the future. How about you, Andy? Does Haney Garcia 2 do anything for you?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it does nothing for me. I would probably maybe slightly favour Haney, but again, that's not really based on a lot. And one of the reasons why I would be curious about it is because who knows, after what we saw at the weekend, who knows who would be better placed to win that fight. But I feel like Haney, after what happened in the first fight, I feel like he deserves it. Like, he deserves the opportunity to try and set that right, as underwhelming as he was at the weekend. I think if there's going to be any kind of natural justice in boxing, then I'm not saying I want to see him win the second fight, but he deserves the opportunity. It's just a difficult situation all round for Garcia, because quite a lot of people have said what you said there, Chris, that he's a good lad. And he's been boxing a really long time, and it doesn't really matter how many people you've got around you telling you this, that and the other. Ultimately, you can't blag yourself. You'll know what the problems are, and you'll know that they need to be addressed, and you might just end up kicking it down the road until you get to the point where you can't kick it down the road anymore. And maybe last weekend was that experience for Garcia. I hope so, because he's got a lot to offer the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need good young stars coming through and bringing through another generation of fans. So it remains to be seen. If the fight happens again, I do lean towards Haney, purely because I think you remember the first fight, Garcia won the rounds where he scored the knockdowns and didn't really win many others. If he doesn't have that assistance in the rematch, maybe he doesn't score so many knockdowns. But yes, before we talk about Teofimo Lopez versus Arnold Barboza, correct, Mr. Billam-Smith, we must talk about a massive win for Rolando Romero. A lot of people gave him really no chance at all of toppling Ryan Garcia. 20-1 he was to win a decision before the fight. Didn't get on that, unfortunately. But yeah, a magnificent performance. 20-1 to win a decision. But I think a lot of people, you could only see the way that he would win that fight. He can punch, and Garcia's been out for a while. You maybe catch him with a shot and put him away. Obviously caught him with a shot in the second round, but kind of like a Rolly Romero with the jab to the body, and that really won him the fight, I felt.
Yeah, and he's weighty, very weighty with it. And where Ryan's so tall, like high guard, that jab to the body is such a good punch, especially as his reactions are very quick. He likes to pull out of sort of with his head quite a lot. That jab to the body was a great shot. And when I thought it was kind of like whoever was jabbing was taking control. And I thought he jabbed really well. He moved his head well. Rolly as well was like giving him different looks and stuff like that. Whereas Ryan sort of only ever gives people one look, and his speed just really catches people off guard. But yeah, I thought it was a solid enough performance from him. He didn't ever want to risk anything by just going gung-ho, but when he did attack, he attacked, he was very weighty. Like, you can just tell by looking at him how weighty his shots would be. It just looks like he's got heavy arms. Everyone knows he's a bit of a puncher and stuff, and you see it when he put his shots together in that second round right at the start, just that little right hand over top, double left hook, and speed with it as well. So yeah, he's a great win for him.
Interesting to see what comes next for Rolando Romero, Andy. Obviously boxed at 147 pounds. I think he's more than happy to stay up there if the opportunities present themselves. Big name as well. You think about it, his fight with Gervonta Davis was a big event at the time. Obviously he came up second best in that, and he boxed Pitbull Cruz, who's another big name, certainly in and around the weight. And then a win over Ryan Garcia puts him in the shop window for a big fight, albeit 47 or 40.
Yeah, it does, and I think people, he's if you're organising an event, then I think you're always confident that he is someone who what you're going to get from him, and that's a really, really good thing. That's a good quality to have. We often kind of look at those types of fighters, and I don't think sometimes they get the credit they really deserve. Just because you are consistent, people will sometimes see you as quite basic, or that's the way he does it and he can't do it any other way. But the way he does it is good to watch, and he's achieved a lot doing it. So what could possibly be wrong with that? So there's always a place for someone like him. There always would be. But now he's had a big win. So yeah, he deserves a really big fight, surely.
Yeah,
that's got to be how the sport works, doesn't it?
Trying to think about who at 147. Obviously, Boots Ennis is unified champion at 147. Brian Norman's got a belt. Mario Barrios has got a belt. I think Rolly's probably the big name fight for all of those. If he does stay at 147 pounds, I can't think of any other bigger fights. Yes, you can make unifications and etc. But as we know, the headline at the weekend on Friday was a non-title fight, Rolly and Ryan Garcia.
After the weekend before that, and he was ringside, wasn't he? Everybody's Conor Benn is a name on people's lips because
Conor Benn and Rolly would be
would be chaos. Would be absolute chaos. I think Rolly kind of poured cold water on that after the fight. I think his interest is more kind of US based names or US names.
And I get that. I get that.
It'd be a great fight, great spectacle.
But fighters who bring it, that's kind of. It would appear at the moment that they're a bit harder to find, that level of consistency in what you're going to get from them from a fan point of view. And sport is entertainment. They seem to be thinner on the ground than they were before.
Conor is one of them, isn't he?
Yeah, Conor is one of them.
Conor
absolutely
is. He's
going
to give it everything in the ring
and in the build-up as well.
And in the build-up.
Yeah, and De La Hoya took to Instagram, I think, the morning after in his dressing gown.
He looked like how we all felt.
But everything he said, I know he can be a bit off the wall at times, but when he starts talking about what people do in the ring, you have to listen to him. And he basically just said, what was that? Like, what fighters need to bring it, throw punches, mix it up, fight.
He said, didn't he? He apologised. He said,
Yeah.
you know, Turkey's
Come
paying
to fight.
all of this money, and they're going out and they're not doing it, and they're not trying, and you know, he's absolutely right in what he's saying, and he's saying it to his three of his fighters, because he went 0-3 on the card, which we'll obviously come on to talk about. But yeah, I thought a really good performance from Rolly Romero. I thought the right hand didn't move from here the whole fight. I thought he was very disciplined. Ismail Salas, of course, one of the great coaches, obviously drilled that into him, and you know, we saw the results. So I think a big fight next for Rolando Romero, either at 140 or 147. And that brings us on to the final fight of Friday's card, the beacon of consistency, Teofimo Lopez. Who would have thought on a weekend of underwhelming, disappointing performances, it would actually be Teofimo Lopez who kind of turned up, did what he was supposed to do, went home and didn't make any noise, did he, Andy?
No, that's exactly what he did, and it's a really good thing, actually, because what we've got from him in recent times is either a mega performance or something really pretty terrible by his standards, given what he's capable of. So to get a just good, solid, professional, job done, no questions display from him is kind of great, actually, because we don't see that very often from him, to be honest. And it bodes well, possibly, for what is to come, because he is a man who does seem to thrive in chaos and unusual surroundings, and he's one of those people. And yeah, he was the one who just came in and did what he was a very, very professional performance, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think we kind of spoke about it beforehand, where, you know, I know it was a very unusual setting and it looked unusual for the fighters. I mean, the way that they were getting to the ring and getting onto the stage and all of that stuff. But you've got somebody in Teofimo Lopez, Chris, who's kind of used to all of any kind of chaos that may be presented around him. And he looked like somebody who was really quite at home in there. I thought he by far outperformed all of his other peers on the card.
Yeah, for sure. And he's like we said, like, he's done that Greatest Showman, like, ring walk, and like that big entrance, and always looks happy on his ring walks and the big show. So I think that was a stage that's probably made for him in Times Square. So lapped it up, did what he was supposed to do, and got a win, and an in-form Barboza as well. You know, he's come off the back of a good win and a decent performance. So in a way, he's probably the fight where you'd probably expect it to be the closest, and if any of the opponents were going to win, in a way, it almost felt like Barboza if Teofimo was flat. So he got the job done.
He got the job done, and got it done really with a bit to spare, Andy. As Chris just mentioned there, Arnold Barboza was in good form, arguably kind of the form guy at 140 pounds with those two wins that he picked up against Ramirez and Jack Catterall. What does that say about Teofimo Lopez's standing at 140? I think we kind of have like two different top fives of the 140. Like, well, if Teofimo Lopez is on, he's number one, but if he's not, he's number 35 or something. You know, but like it seemed as though that he may be starting to hit his mid-20s now and starting to hit that level of consistency, hopefully, anyway.
Yeah, I hope so too, because he, when he's good, he's really, really good. And he beat Josh Taylor, and Josh Taylor was the man at 140. I know he didn't have all the belts by the time they boxed, but that linear title, that was still his, wasn't it? He was still the number one. You had to leave him in that position, and he beat him. And yeah, I think that he should be the best in that division. He isn't always, but I think he's capable of getting to a level of turning in performances that the others, I wouldn't say they're definitely not, but they haven't compared to him. You know, he's got the biggest wins, isn't he?
Absolutely. Bob Arum afterwards, who's of course seen, you know, he's been around the block one or two times. Mr. Arum said that he didn't feel that Teofimo Lopez versus Devin Haney or Ryan Garcia would be competitive fights at all. Do you agree with that? On
the basis of the weekend, yeah, I do agree with that. How could you not agree with that? Given what we saw.
Chris, one thing I wanted to put across to you before we move on and talk about Canelo again is you, of course, share a gym with a budding 140-pound prospect in Adam Azim. This past weekend, we saw, 40, 47, 44, but they're all in and around the same mix. How far do you think Adam is off the guys that we saw this weekend?
I think ability-wise, he's not far off at all. I think it's just that maturing in as a man, and he's done so much of that over the last year, 18 months especially. But it's just getting to that level, and he could win a world title now. But it's like, is he ready for those really big occasions? And that's, he might be. It's not my job to manage him, but I think he's not far off. Within a year, I think he'll be within a year of now. I think he'll be world champion, or at least fighting for a world title, and be ready for that. And then that will be, Adam Azim will be the name of that division, I believe. And he's got so much ability, and I think the last few performances have really shown his maturity in the ring, how he's dealing with the occasions outside the ring as well. And you notice it day to day in the gym. Very mature, very, very, very professional, and some of that ability and hype around him, with such a huge engine in Sky Sports behind him. He's still very, very grounded and understands that the work's got to be done, and it's great to see. Like, he comes back into camp, gets Greg straight in, the breathwork coach. He's in from day one, and everything's done properly. And I'm so excited to see him develop even further. But not far off those names at all. And I think, especially based off the weekend, I genuinely believe he can beat them all now. But it's just being able to do that, getting to the level where you can beat these guys at 80% and not have to be 100% every time, and that's just a maturing and an experience thing.
As much as I think we both think that it's maybe the end of the line for Jose Ramirez, potential Adam Azim opponent, if he does decide to carry on boxing.
Yeah, he's kind of
perfect,
really. Yeah, he's former unified champion, boxed for Undisputed. All right, it's a while ago, but it's not, it's recent enough.
Still not been stopped either, Ramirez,
yeah.
Which is often, unfortunately, a very macabre way of looking at it. Fighters don't tend to go on the back of a decision defeat, particularly that sort of fight. I'm not sure that's how Ramirez will want to go out, on the back of chasing Haney around Times Square for 12 rounds. No,
I agree. I mean, I think he would be kind of ideal, and Azim has been. He's been guided really, really well, and he does seem like somebody who's absolutely on the straight and narrow. He seems completely obsessed with boxing and with living the life of being a boxer. And it's interesting when someone's kind of that age, because you do sort of see them change physically over a period of time, and not just their body, their face kind of changes. I don't know what that's about. As you get a bit older, he just looks, the kind of boyishness has gone out of his face now, and he just looks hard, like a tough man. Not because he's taken a load of damage, because he hasn't, but you do see it, and you're used to seeing kind of physical development, but sometimes somebody's face just not all of a sudden, but you haven't seen him for a few weeks or a few months. You see him all the time, but like me, you haven't seen him for a few months, and then you next see him and you think, oh, his face just seems a bit kind of like more angular, a bit sharper. He just looks tougher. And that's happened to him the last couple of years, definitely.
Yeah, I feel like we were saying that before he boxed the Harry Davies. Before he boxed the Harry Davies, kind of looks like he is growing up a little bit now, Mr. Azim. Right, okay, on to the frolics of Saturday night in Riyadh. We're going to not talk about the whole card, of course. A win for Jaime Munguia in a rematch against Bruno Saras. In keeping with the weekend, didn't really catch fire, that one. Neither Andy did the Battle of Africa between Efe Ajagba of Nigeria and Martin Bakole of Airdrie. What did you make of another kind of weird performance? I mean, I think it's a measure of the standard of the weekend that it was one of the better fights somehow. But a draw for Ajagba and Martin Bakole. What did you make of the fight?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was okay. It wasn't. I quite enjoyed it, but at the same time, you're just kind of sitting there, sort of really waiting for something to happen, and it never quite did. And I've always been a fan of that fight. I know it was made well before Martin Bakole took the short notice job against Joseph Parker, and I'd always made him a favourite in the fight, and I still did after Parker, although there is no such thing as a kind of no-lose shot to nothing in boxing, because when you end the fight getting counted out, he wasn't chinned, he wasn't knocked out, but he was counted out. That's not a good thing. It's so yeah, this idea that, well, there was, he hasn't lost anything by it. Well, he quite literally has lost a fight, and had a losing experience, and all of that.
Well.
Yeah, and all of that. So I made him a slightly less heavy favourite after that, but I still did feel like he would probably get the win. But then he weighed in at £299, which is only £10 lighter. I think he was 310, was he, against Parker. And subsequently he said he's now going to get a nutritionist on board. Billy Nelson has said, he was too heavy, and he was, because his really good performances have come when he's been pretty much bang on 20 stone. He was up at 300 against Takam, but that was due to problems during camp, and he was kind of noticed. But say like Yoka, Jared Anderson, those sort of wins, they came around 280, didn't they? And that's obviously where he is best. So there's an obvious thing to address there. Yeah, it was okay as a spectacle, that one. It was kind of okay. I mean, I thought a draw was probably fair enough. I didn't see any big problem with that.
Yeah, I scored it a draw. Chris, I know we spoke about it. You also had it a draw. I felt like it was a bit of a fight of two halves, to a degree anyway. Bakole finished the fight in the ascendancy. But still, for me, we spoke about Martin Bakole a lot on here. One of his bigger advocates, I suppose. Less so after the last couple of fights. But anyway, has these periods throughout the fight where he just doesn't really seem to do anything. I mean, he had that great flurry in the fourth round where Ajagba was against the rope and he let his hands go for 60 or 70 seconds, and it was really 3 or 4 rounds before he was able to put the shots together again. Very frustrating to watch, Martin Bakole. Is that mentality? Is that him not having an S&C coach, not being in optimal condition? Obviously, you've boxed on the same cards as him in the past. He's a former Cyclone fighter. What do you think is going on with Martin?
I think he looks very wary early on of Ajagba's power. We spoke about earlier with Garcia and Rowley, like they look like they were wary of each other's power. And I think he looks wary, and I think that's probably from the Parker fight, and he knows Ajagba can punch. I mean, he's a heavyweight, but he's a big puncher.
He's a puncher at heavyweight as well.
But yeah, so the first couple of rounds, nothing really happened. It started to catch fire a bit in the third and fourth, but after that fourth round, he just looked tired, and that would be down to conditioning. The weight won't help his conditioning because he just clearly got excess weight he doesn't need. And at that weight, if he was to lose a stone, that's not a lot of difference in terms of percentage of body weight. You could lose a stone of literal body fat and be so much stronger and more conditioned, and I think that's clearly what he needs. Obviously got Richard Riakporhe in camp now, who obviously boxed on the card but was 230 pounds, 235, but looked great at it. So and looked still mobile and stuff like that, and I think hopefully you can learn off people even if they're less experienced than you. I think that's important that Bakole can do that, and hopefully he does, and he can put his shots together so well. But I think when he doesn't get the reaction he's looking for or land the right shots, he probably lost a bit of confidence in that from the Parker fight, but also his conditioning, because that's what happened after that fourth round. Sort of let his hands go low, just really stuck it on him, and then didn't really get enough of a reaction. The next round didn't do anything. I can't remember what round it was. Like the second round, I looked at him and his legs were literally just straight, like he was just stood there straight legged. It's like there's no bend in your knees. There's no. Where Ajagba was like always, he's an athlete, a great athlete anyway, Ajagba, but was fleet footed and like I said, just athletic. Whereas Bakole wasn't that. He was just straight legged, looked to put his shots together. Probably doesn't really think about his positioning of his body, of where his feet should be and stuff. He just wants to land and thinks that'll be enough, and it has been. So, but you've got to be looking for improvements, and I think a nutritionist and S&C will be huge improvements, and get into his legs a little bit more and be able to deliver shots, because he delivers power with pretty much arm punches. You don't see him turning through. You look at like AJ's shot against Ngannou, follows through with that right hand like perfectly, like executed right hand. but the biomechanics of it is perfect as well to go with his athleticism, whereas Bakole just turns his shoulders, doesn't really turn his hips into it that much. You start doing that with him, then he's an absolute force.
Andy mentioned there, Billy Nelson's come out and said, we're going to get him an S&C coach and we're going to get him a nutritionist and blah, blah, blah. Are you surprised that's not in place already? This guy's a top 10, top 15 heavyweight in the world.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yes, heavyweights they probably don't think they need a nutritionist because they don't have to make weight, but nutritionists aren't about weight making, they're about performing at your weight. You look at AJ, you look at Parker, you look at like their way they filled out over the years of S&C and nutrition, and obviously AJ is like the consummate professional and is always looking for edges, and if you're doing that and you've got all the ability, then you're laughing, and you're 80-90% of the way there. And I'm very, very surprised. I mean, can I talk from my own experience? I've been looking had a nutritionist since my 12th fight, and definitely wasn't on the money, or even now I'm not on the money that Martin Bakole's on. It's like, why wouldn't you like just get by? I never understand it because my mindset is always like, right, tick every box. So when people aren't, I just don't understand it, especially at that level.
Yeah, and particularly somebody who is knocking on the door for a world title shot.
I mean, Billy Nelson may well have been telling him for a while that those are things they need to do, but if he doesn't want to do it and know he's not going to engage with it, then there's not really any point. It might take, like we discussed with Garcia, it'll often take something like a defeat and then a draw for the fighter to realise, okay, well, yeah, maybe those changes you've been talking about, maybe we do need to do it.
Billy was talking about how Martin Bakole is a vegetarian and there's only certain shops in Glasgow that sell Congolese food. He only eats Congolese food. So I had this mental image of Billy Nelson chasing him around Glasgow and going into the Congolese shops. Says, has he been in yet? But anyway, very interesting dynamic between.
I mean, shout out to Billy Nelson. He's lost a huge amount of weight over the years.
He needs to get on the Billy Nelson diet.
But Billy's done really well. The last time I seen him, I was really. I said to him, "Fair play, you've done well there, mate."
Yeah, he needs to get Martin on the same program that he's on. But it takes two to tango. We've only talked about Martin Bakole. Obviously, F.A. Ajagba was in there as well. Did a lot of good things, Andy. I thought the jab was working well. He hurt Bakole a couple of times as well with that right hand, as Chris mentioned. Significant puncher. Didn't get the win. He did feel hard done by. I think the general feeling online was it was either a draw or 6-4 to Ajagba. I think the second round was the kind of kicker. But where next for him? I mean, do we see a rematch next? I mean, Ajagba still with Top Rank, so he'll be able to go and get he could fight a Richard Torres or somebody like that. What do you think's next for F.A. Ajagba?
Yeah, if he got the win, then he would it would have been literally winner stays on, wouldn't it? And he would have got a fight, a Riyadh season fight, a Ring Magazine fight, maybe against one of the other heavyweights who has also won and stayed on. That would have been the route for him. A little bit more difficult to say now. I don't necessarily think people will be thirsting for the rematch. It wasn't a terrible fight, but as we said, it wasn't brilliant either. Ajagba's kind of interesting because the defeat against Frank Sanchez, and I was there for that. That I think was quite damaging for him because up until that point he looked really good, hadn't he? And there was a lot of noise around him. But it was one of those ones where when you look back on it, you just thought that Sanchez was not the right guy for him, really, given the way that he fights. He's enormously impressive when you kind of see him, Ajagba. Physically, he's, as Chris said, like he is athletic. He's got that kind of agility to him, and he's certainly got power as well. But yeah, I mean, maybe Top Rank will do their kind of Top Rank thing and throw two of their own in together and see what happens, because they didn't quite get an answer, did they, on Saturday regarding where he is in the mix in that division. I think
if Top Rank or the people involved with Ajagba would have known beforehand, or somebody would have said, look, Bakole will come in at 300 pounds, he'll have 2 good rounds, do you fancy your chances of winning that fight? They would have said absolutely yes. And obviously they feel that they won it, but they didn't. So that does potentially speak volumes. I mean, it wasn't I don't think anyway, a prime Martin Bakole in there, the best, most dangerous version of him, and unfortunately Ajagba still couldn't quite get the win. Ajagba against Jared Anderson, potentially, another top ranked fight.
Yeah, they could do that, couldn't they?
Interesting to see where Jared Anderson goes next. But anyway, one fight that we do know is happening next is Saul Canelo Alvarez against Terence Crawford, announced in the immediate aftermath of that great win over William Scull at the weekend. Chris, going to come to you first. Excitement level for Canelo Crawford, where are you at?
I think it's more exciting now, but I mean, a couple of years ago, you wouldn't have really given Crawford a chance, not just because of the weight discrepancy. And
a couple of weeks ago,
but like, I think Crawford can move, but he doesn't move like Scull does. He'll stay at the edge of range and then just nip out and sort of land a jab or just beat you to the punch and then be out of range and able to time his shots, and he's very accurate. And I think that's kind of what Mayweather did against Canelo. Yes, a much better version of Canelo now in terms of his skill set, but now over the hill version of Canelo as well. So that was like a very raw version of Canelo. He's learnt a lot, peaked, and now he's kind of coming down the other side for sure. But that's what Mayweather did. He kept the space, like kept at the end of range, and Canelo never doubles his feet up really. Like on the attack, it's one step to load up, or he might come in with a jab and then go again. But all Mayweather was doing was that double step out, take the space, double step out, take the space, and then landing in between. And it was so effective. And I think Crawford's got the ability to do that, and I think that makes it a much more exciting fight after the other night. Seeing someone who moves a lot and have success. You know, the right uppercut he landed, I think it was around 4 or 5, like little things like that. And look, Crawford's not going to go in there and try and knock Canelo out. I think we know that. And I don't think Canelo will go in there trying to bully Crawford to a degree. I think he will when he can get his shots off. But yeah, it's an interesting fight now, and it's kind of now become, I think, more across the board a more 50-50 fight.
Andy?
Yeah, I feel like he can win that fight, Crawford.
You thought that for a little while.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I have. And you know, my usual painful logic would dictate that I would say that he can't, because obviously undisputed at 2 lower weights, and then he's had one fight, hasn't he, at 154, and then he's jumping up another stone, and that's a lot. But he's had a long time to work towards this, because he's always expected that this would happen. I think they've always been very confident that it would, and for a while I think they had a good idea of when it would. And when you see him up close, Crawford, I saw him in December, and he's pretty big. You know, he is pretty big, and he was in good nick too. It wasn't like he was overweight. You could see in his face that he was in shape, and I just looked at him and looked at the kind of like arms on him and the shoulders on him, and just thought, yeah, I can see this. But at the same time, he is still stepping up to 12 stone, and Canelo's an incredibly solid 12 stone fighter. So it could be one of those things where actually Canelo wins the fight quite easily, and if, like me, you're giving Crawford a good chance, you'll feel like an idiot, because what happened was what was always going to happen. What history kind of tells you is always going to happen in those sorts of fights. But I do feel like he can win. I really do. And with Canelo, he's been doing this a really long time now. He's had loads of fights, loads of training camps, and we talk about kind of losing gears as you get older, and that can be particularly true if you go for a while not having needed them. And I don't know if he's really got that higher gear anymore. I don't think he probably does either. But you feel like he's going to need it against Crawford. I love it. I think it's a really, really good fight, and I think it's going to be massive by the time it comes around. They've told us, haven't they, that it's September the 12th in Las Vegas. Friday. You'd imagine, will it be at the NFL Stadium?
So the Allegiant Stadium.
Right. You know, that's going to be absolutely tremendous.
I think the UFC have T-Mobile on the 13th. I think
right.
That's why it's going on the 12th.
I mean, it's going to be tremendous, and they've said that that's going to be the first one promoted by Dana White, and they'll want to really make a big splash and an impact and bring all of their considerable experience with promotion, obviously, to that. Get it on the biggest platform they can get it on, because they'll know that this is their it's not an audition because the relationship is there, isn't it? But it really matters for them how the first one goes. And yes, it's a good thing that the first one for them is huge because it should make it easier, but the expectation will be big that they really make some noise with it. And the sport does need a shot in the arm in America. So there's a lot on this, I think, when you look at it in all sorts of ways. For us, it's great because I think it will be good to watch and it is fascinating. And for the sport of boxing in North America, it does feel big. It really does feel big.
Given Canelo's performance at the weekend, and I guess you would go further back and see Crawford's performance against Israel Madrimov, who do you make the favourite in that fight now? Does it have to be the size of Canelo that has him the favourite?
Yeah, I've always liked Crawford as well, just because of like Canelo's weaknesses and Crawford's strengths are that timing. And Canelo's not a tall, super long arm, super middleweight. What he does do is he throws that really long right hook to the body against movers, which he landed a couple of times against Scull, but Scull was gone a lot of the time, just too far out. And Canelo looked a little bit slower than he would have done a couple of years ago. So yeah, I always thought Crawford has the ability to, due to the styles. So I'd probably go Crawford, but by the time that fight comes round, he would have been out the ring for 13 months. Does that help him or not? Who knows? He seems like the sort of guy who stays in the gym, stays active, got that wrestling background, so he's got that strength. I think he kind of likes to train from what I gather. So yeah, I'd if I was to pick, I probably would pick Crawford, as mad as that is, because he's way lighter. It's not like with Eubank and Ben, we had Eubank Jr. and Conor Ben, we had like, everyone would say it was two weights, but Conor had boxed at 154. The last couple of fights he's been up there for a while, whereas Crawford's boxed at 154 once. It would be 13 months by the time they get in the ring. So it's mad to say that, but he's not that I think it'll be an attritional fight, but he's got that strength base from his wrestling background. It's something I've always admired of his, is like he always looks very solid, but he can move really well and his timing and everything. I think it could be all wrong for Canelo.
Andy, you've kind of picked Crawford in that fight long before the Canelo fight this weekend. I'm assuming what we saw this past weekend reinforced your pick.
Yeah, I think so. I didn't read loads into Canelo against Scull, to be honest, for reasons we went into earlier. But it's just as time passes, and everybody tells you the same thing. And I know fighters achieve greater longevity now and all the rest of it. And Canelo's not that old, but you need to look at when people started. For the length of career, that's what really matters.
15.
And he started, yeah, exactly, yeah. And he started when he was 15, so he's been at the top in massive fights for a really long time, and all the pressure that comes with that, and all the expectation that comes with that, and all the wear and tear and the training camps and all of the whole thing. You know, it's an unimaginable, in a way, kind of life to have to lead. And against someone like Crawford, who is just a really special fighter, he's very, very good. If he's just slipped, then that's going to be a real leveler in terms of the weight, because let's not forget what Crawford has achieved. You know, he is a modern great, and for him, the motivation for winning this is massive, because he can become a 3-time undisputed champion, having jumped up a couple of weight divisions to do it, or having jumped up 3 from welterweight to do it, which would be pretty astonishing. He'll have completed the game and then some. Yeah, I think it's terrific. It's terrific. They really do need to get it out into the mainstream, outside of our kind of boxing world, because it's got two tremendous athletes and skilled practitioners in it. But we can't, as mad as it sounds, it could be quite trade if enough people don't know about it.
It's How do you do that though? Because they're not too.
Get it on Netflix.
Yeah,
Just
something like that.
one.
But what I mean
get it
is
on Netflix. All the shoulder
ESPN,
content on
Netflix.
Netflix.
You've got to,
And get it advertising on your Netflix as soon as possible. As they did with Tyson and Paul. Obviously, Mike Tyson is Mike Tyson. Still, for me, the A side in any fight he's in from a commercial standpoint. But anyway, like that had like a week and a half or so of just. It was as soon as you turned Netflix on, it was there. Whether you liked it or not, it was straight in. It was just in there as soon as you turned it on. I think that will do enough. I think because we're never going to get both.
But it's not going to be, is it?
How do you mean? What, on Netflix?
Yeah.
TBC.
They've announced that they've got no broadcast partner. I think the fact that they've announced that there's no broadcast partner is not the best news for DAZN. Sorry, guys.
I mean, you could have it on DAZN as well. I don't know how Netflix are probably going to want it exclusive.
I was going to say, if you're Netflix, you're talking
people
about
don't like.
territories.
I was going to say people generally don't like to share, but in recent times they've had no choice but to share.
Yeah, but I think if you're
them, you could probably
Netflix,
just say, listen, it's us or it's not. And
so I think it could very well go on Netflix, which would be enormous. Obviously, TKO have that relationship through the WWE. There's also rumours about the UFC going to Netflix when their deal with ESPN is up. So that could be where it does go. Lot on the line for both fighters. I think for Crawford, it is very much that if he beats Canelo, and he would have had, it's similar to like when that great photo of Usyk looking at Joshua. Crawford's been looking at Canelo and wanting this fight and talking about this fight since long before it became a realistic proposition, essentially. So for him, he's had his eye on the prize for a long time.
I think that could be quite key, because I think I've said this to you before or maybe after your fight with Lawrence. So I might have said it to I can't remember, it was one of the two of you. Sometimes you get these matchups where the one might not necessarily expect that they're going to be fighting the other one, but the other one does, and then it happens. And maybe you paid a lot more attention to your spars with Bakole than he did. I don't know. I might be wrong.
I mean, to touch on that, I probably just felt the improvements I've made since he left the gym, like he wouldn't have known about. Yeah. So, but I was very comfortable taking.
Was he someone who you looked at and you just thought, I am going to be fighting you?
Not obviously not while I was in the gym, while he was in the gym, but
was it in your mind
from the amateurs, I wanted to fight him. When he was in the ABAs, I was like, he's number one. I get the chance to fight the number one. Then he pulled out he got taken out because he qualified for the Olympics.
Yeah,
and then obviously turned pro. He was like British champion and stuff. So I was like, right, I'm going to need to get to that level. And then it ended up joining the gym, and then I'm like annoyed about it, and because he got this thing. So yeah, I think I know what you mean. I definitely had my eyes on Lawrence a lot more through my amateurs and pros than he would have done with me, 100%.
Yeah, and I think that Crawford will have that bullseye on Canelo's back and will have had it. But on the flip side, for Canelo, at this stage of his career, losing to essentially a welterweight. He's a welterweight. Crawford's best, when we look back on him in 10, 20 years' time, he will be a welterweight, despite what he achieves at other weight classes.
That's good motivation, isn't it? Because a lot of people...
If you're Canelo, you lose to this little man jumping up 3 weight classes.
He's done.
I mean, where does he go from there? I mean, maybe do a rematch for money, but other than that, I mean, like, he's only lost to, officially anyway, Floyd Mayweather and Dimitri Bivol. Floyd Mayweather, one of the great greats. Bivol, a light heavyweight and a great light heavyweight.
Exactly, they're easy to explain, aren't they? When you look at your resume as well. First one was too soon. The second one, he was too big. You lose to Crawford, you're fresh out of excuses, aren't you? Yeah, he's really, really good. Obviously, he's brilliant, but at the same time, people will, they would point the finger, and that's why I don't think people would necessarily give Canelo loads of credit for kind of taking this fight, because I just think you're much bigger than him. You should win. But at the same time, I do give him credit for taking the fight, because the jeopardy is big.
But the thing is,
if he loses,
if he goes in there and I don't see him blowing Crawford away or anything like that. But if he goes in there and stops Crawford after 8 or 9 rounds, no one's going to go, I can't believe you stopped him. Everyone's going to go, you beat a welterweight, you stopped a welterweight. It was boxing. That's what people do anyway. But so, I mean, it was great over the weekend.
Try as hard as we can not to give people credit for
over the weekend. It was brilliant, wasn't it? We had everybody slagging off the fact that Ryan Garcia's fight was shit, and Devin Haney's fight was shit, and Canelo's fight was shit, and then Inoue gets dropped, and everyone goes, "Oh, Inoue! Like, how can Inoue do this?" And like, he got dropped, and he's
what
like, you can't have it both ways.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, anyway, and picking it up, because we've just been warned that we got started late today, so we're running out of time. Before we do move on and talk about Naoya Inoue, Badu Jack, of course, win over Noel Mikaelian, whatever we're calling him, this week. I felt Mikaelian won that fight. Obviously, the judges did not agree. Chris, you are, of course, an interested observer in the cruiserweight division. What did you make of the fight?
Yeah, kind of took the theme of the weekend in a way. It wasn't like overly like boring, but there was parts where not a lot of standing off at times. But I was pleased to see Badou Jack trying to win the fight and put his shots together a bit more. But yeah, it was a close fight. I didn't actually score it, but interested of the observer obviously after my recent win, and who knows, maybe that Canelo undercard can save a spot for me against Badou Jack. But we'll see.
We'll wait and see. A quick turnaround for him at this stage of his career, Badou Jack to box in September, but you never know. Right, we will finish today by talking about the one man who did deliver this weekend, certainly delivered in a special fight. Naoya Inoue successfully retains his undisputed super bantamweight titles, Andy, but was given an almighty scare in the second round by Ramon Cardenas, dropped by a heavy left hook, until, of course, Inoue did what he does, got up and won the fight by stoppage. A very, very exciting fight, and just what the doctor ordered. Yeah,
it was. It was a really exciting fight. Good crowd in there as well. And, full respect and credit to Cardenas, because he didn't really show any kind of fear. It was a huge step up, and he brought it. And there's a lot of risk involved in that against someone like Inoue. And Inoue was kind of swaggering in, wasn't he, as he caught that left hand. And down he went. And it's exactly what you want in a fight like that, isn't it? For the favourite to get knocked down and have to pick themselves back up off the floor or experience some kind of adversity, and then you've got a real contest on your hands. And it was thoroughly enjoyable all of the way through. I mean, he's just great in a way, isn't he? He's really, really good to watch. And it was interesting to see that he was the draw that he was in Las Vegas.
Yeah, it's funny because he's obviously a name in boxing, but he's like still the guy who's trying to entertain. Where like you look at all the other fights in the weekend, a lot of them weren't not trying to entertain, but there seemed like a lack of effort, whereas he was the opposite, and he puts a lot of pride, I imagine. I mean, they're very proud people, aren't they, the Japanese? So a lot of pride in what he is. And I mean, the shot he got dropped with was a good shot, but he's also been dropped by that shot. Was it Neri who dropped him with the left hand?
Yeah, left hand.
Exactly the same. Yeah. Like literally exactly the same. But still, he just goes after people. I thought it was a good fight. For me, it was like the fourth round. He was in a complete flow state. So like, for those that don't know what flow state is, it's just that effortless sort of high level performance. But it just comes effortlessly. We all get it in our different fields. I mean, Andy, you'll get it in commentary where it's just the words are just flowing out your mouth. Rob, you'll get it when you're writing in articles and stuff like that. The stuff you've done with my stuff, I'll get it through you just watching Inoue. You could just see that fourth round was just completely effortless in terms of his brain was just working on its own. It was just that repetition of all that repetition's paid off over the years, and he's just there, like the jab comes out, it's dip right hand, and then he's just boom, and he's just flowing. The shot comes back, and he just moves back and straight on the attack again. And that round onwards, from that round, he just took over and just gradually broke him down, I thought.
Yeah, it was a fantastic performance outside of that second round, really. But he also looked as though Andy was feeling the weight in those shots from Cardenas, who, a good puncher at super bantamweight. If you're Junto Nakatani, you're probably looking at that and thinking, I might be able to knock this man out.
Yeah, you probably are. You probably are. And that's the thing with him, isn't it? That's what we're all kind of wondering, aren't we? Is how high up can he take it, basically. I get the feeling we're probably going to find out sooner rather than later.
He's spoken in the aftermath of the fight. It's something that he has spoken about in a way quite a lot over the last year or so, is that he won't be rushed in moving up to featherweight. He's been very clear that, he took his time really moving up from bantamweight, and he indeed really super flyweight. He didn't kind of have the same jump up like he did from light fly. And he won't be rushed into featherweight. We saw Rafael Espinoza at the weekend, the 6'1" of him at featherweight, who looks a real problem and a real handful.
That's maybe the weirdest looking fight I've ever seen in terms of the physical difference between the two of them.
Wait till you see him fight Nick Ball.
Yeah, no, well, there you go. Yeah, I mean, it just seems like he was a bit cartoonish, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But it was mad. He's absolutely massive.
But people will. We had this situation. You get it with great fighters that Mayweather had it. When's Mayweather going to fight Gennady Golovkin? Gennady Golovkin's a middleweight. And then if he beat Gennady Golovkin, people will want him to fight Andre Ward or something. It's just the way.
And I always loved the fact that he didn't do it, and he was just like, no.
Yeah, he was. The guy started at super featherweight.
I'm not just for you. I'm not going to do that. I don't need to.
And people seemingly and it's always the way when you get these supersonic fighters who go through the weights. People just think they can keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it, and then of course you get the people who have only seen him as a bantam and super bantam talk about, well, until he wins a world title at 130 against fighters that I've seen box, then he's no good. Which is just boxing for you, isn't it? But doesn't look as though he's in any hurry to go to 126. And I think, dropped twice in his last 4 fights at 122 pounds, admittedly by guys who can really punch. Luis Nery and Ramon Cardenas can both really crack and really punch their weight. But has his air of invincibility been kind of cracked by that in the last couple of fights? Obviously, he come back not the last couple of fights, but in those fights, come back and won both by stoppage. But again, we didn't see those cracks in him before.
Yeah, maybe a bit, but I think for the kind of Inoue business moving forward and the boxing business moving forward, that's good because people will fancy it a bit more than maybe they did before. It won't so much be a case of, I wonder how long I can hang in there with him for. Like it has been at times, like it was with Golovkin at times, for example. People won't be looking for the record of, he has been taking the distance, but they won't be looking for the moral victory of toughing it out. They'll be going in there thinking they can win, and that's good. That's definitely a good thing. So a bit of vulnerability because you're willing to take a few risks, maybe, or because there is the odd chink there. That's a good thing.
Absolutely.
And the fact that he comes back and wins is just does that add to the air of invincibility because you're getting hurt and dropped and still winning? Like
Beterbiev.
Yeah, and he's not coming.
He's been put down a couple of times, hasn't he?
Yeah.
And been rocked a couple of times and stuff like that. And people think, ooh, he's absolutely mega. But at the same time, you feel like, maybe
if I can land that one.
Yeah,
yeah, that's it. And with Inoue, he does have the talent and the ability to make things boring. And thankfully, after the weekend we had, he decided to not do that and still go for the kill, which gave Ramon Cardenas some hope in the fight, but also made for a much more thrilling spectacle for us. Unfortunately, we've run out of time this week, so we'll catch you next week for Lee Wood versus Anto Kakachi review. Before I let everybody go, including you and Harry over there, shout out Harry. How does Naoya Inoue boxing Murodjon Akhmadaliev, difficult one to say after the weekend we've had. How does that fight go? Looks as though, Chris, it's going to be happening in September.
I'd make Inoue the favourite. I think. So yeah, I always have. Obviously, MJ's looked decent more recently, obviously, but he's had that loss. I think Inoue's still that invincible sort of cloak is still there. I think I think in that fight, I think Junto Nakatani would be the one that maybe wouldn't make him the favourite in.
Andy?
Yeah, same. I think Akhmadaliev has. I think he's earned it. He's been up at that world title level for a long time. He won his first world title in his 7th or 8th fight or something like that. So it's a good fight. I'm on board with it, but I struggle to see him beating Inoue.
What about Inoue versus Nakatani?
That's really the one, isn't it? That is the one.
Next year, apparently in Tokyo at the Tokyo Dome. That's what Inoue said.
I'm there.
Yep, there we go.
I want to go to Japan
any
anyway.
Japanese cruiserweights
Yeah.
fight on the undercard don't tend to compete that high up, do they? Our Japanese brethren. But there we go. That's all we have time for this week. I said that's all we have time for. We didn't even have time to fit in everything else that we wanted to talk about. It must have been such a packed weekend of boxing. But from me, Rob Tebbutt, from Chris Billam-Smith and Mr. Andy Clarke, thanks very much for joining us, and we'll catch up with you next week.